It was a routine summer evening in New York. A Boeing 747 lines up for takeoff, filled with families, students, and seasoned crew. The aircraft cleared for departure. But just 12 minutes later, something goes terribly wrong. Eyewitnesses report a streak of light in the sky, followed by a massive explosion. What really happened to TWA Flight 800? And how did it change aviation forever? July 17, 1996. A calm summer evening at JFK Airport in New York. TWA Flight 800, a Boeing 747-100, was preparing for a routine overnight transatlantic flight to Paris. None of the 230 people on board could have imagined that this journey would end in tragedy. The aircraft, tail number N93119, had been flying since 1971. It was one of the earliest 747s built and had logged over 93,000 hours of flight time. Despite its age, the jet was meticulously maintained and certified for international operations. The flight was scheduled to continue on to Rome after Paris, so it was carrying a full complement of fuel and cargo. The aircraft had a nearly full load of passengers, crew, and baggage. It was a typical high-volume summer evening for transatlantic departures. At the controls was Captain Ralph Kevorkian, a highly experienced pilot with over 18,000 hours of flight time. He was joined by First Officer Stephen Snyder and Flight Engineer Richard Campbell. All three men had decades of experience, including extensive time flying the Boeing 747. In the cabin were 14 flight attendants and 3 off-duty TWA employees traveling as passengers. The 212 passengers included a wide range of travelers: families heading on vacation, students on exchange programs, business travelers, and tourists. Among them was Pam Lechner, a prominent victims' rights advocate traveling with her 2 daughters. There was also French hockey player Michael Breistrov and several American students en route to summer programs in Europe. The atmosphere on board, as described by ground staff and cabin crew, was upbeat and typical of a summer international departure. The aircraft had been parked at Gate 27 in Terminal 5 for hours. Due to a delay in loading luggage, the air conditioning systems had been operating on the ground longer than usual. These systems were located beneath the center fuel tank and would later play a critical role in what happened. At around 8:02 p.m., Flight 800 pushed back from the gate. Engines were started, and the aircraft began its taxi to the departure runway. The route took them along taxiways Bravo and Alpha, eventually leading them to runway 22R, one of JFK's longest runways. As the aircraft taxied, the crew conducted their standard pre-departure checklist, confirming flap settings, verifying engine performance, checking flight control surfaces, and setting takeoff trim. The weather was clear, with visibility over 10 miles and only light winds from the west. There were no thunderstorms or adverse conditions, just a peaceful summer twilight. The takeoff sequence was cleared by the tower, and the aircraft began its roll down the runway at approximately 8:29 p.m. The 747 lifted off smoothly and began a left-hand turn over the southern coast of Long Island, climbing toward its initial cruising altitude. Air traffic control cleared Flight 800 to climb to 19,000 feet as it headed northeast over the Atlantic Ocean. Inside the flight deck, Captain Kevorkian and First Officer Snyder monitored their instruments, adjusting engine power, confirming airspeed, and maintaining their climb rate. Flight Engineer Richard Campbell, seated behind them, was keeping a close eye on the aircraft systems. Engine temperatures, electrical loads, hydraulic pressure, and fuel balance. Nothing out of the ordinary was reported. The weather remained clear and calm, with no turbulence, no storms, and excellent visibility. The crew was transitioning through roughly 13,700 feet when they gave what would become their final radio transmission. Climbing through 3700, their tone was calm, professional, standard for this phase of flight. What happened next occurred in an instant. There was no mayday call, no emergency checklist, no warning lights. The cockpit voice recorder didn't capture any sign of trouble. Investigators later determined that the flight crew likely had no idea what was about to happen. They were still in the early climb, focused on managing altitude and engine performance, a quiet, methodical part of the flight. But below their feet, in the center wing fuel tank, a silent danger was building. Due to the long pre-flight delay and the extended use of the air conditioning units positioned just beneath the tank, the small amount of fuel inside had been heated far above normal temperatures. This created a mix of fuel vapor and air, a volatile, flammable mixture. Investigators believed that an electrical short circuit, possibly in the fuel quantity indication system wiring, sent a spark into the tank. That spark was all it took. The resulting explosion tore through the center of the aircraft. It's important to understand that the 747's design included three main sections: the forward fuselage, the wing box, and the aft section. The explosion in the center tank fractured the wing box. Almost instantly, the nose of the aircraft separated from the rest of the plane. Without the forward fuselage, the remaining structure began to break apart under aerodynamic stress. Had the pilots been given any warning, a fuel imbalance, an electrical alert, or even a fuel pump anomaly, they might have been able to respond. But there were none. The spark that ignited the tank happened internally and left no time for intervention. In the cabin, passengers likely experienced only a brief moment of confusion, if any. The disintegration of the aircraft occurred so rapidly that the breakup sequence was likely complete within seconds. The aircraft was still in climb, seatbelt signs were on, and cabin crew were likely preparing for cruise. It was a moment of calm before a tragedy that no one could foresee. At 8:31 p.m., a massive explosion lit up the skies off the coast of East Mauritius. Eyewitnesses along the shore reported seeing a streak of light rising into the sky, followed by a bright flash and falling debris. Dozens of boats and helicopters rushed to the site, but there were no survivors. Wreckage was scattered across a 40-square-mile area of the Atlantic Ocean. Bodies, luggage, and aircraft fragments floated on the surface. Over the following weeks, divers and submersible vehicles recovered nearly 95% of the aircraft from the ocean floor. The fuselage was painstakingly reconstructed inside a hangar in Calverton, New York. This skeletal reconstruction of the 747 would become a vital part of the investigation. The FBI immediately launched a criminal investigation, working alongside the NTSB. Early theories included terrorism, a missile strike, or a bomb planted in the luggage. The proximity of Navy training exercises in the area, combined with witness reports of streaks rising into the air, fueled speculation. Traces of explosives were even found on some seats, but it was later determined these may have come from contamination during routine training of bomb-sniffing dogs. As evidence accumulated, attention turned to the aircraft's center wing fuel tank. This tank, located just behind the nose gear and beneath the passenger cabin, had been partially filled during pre-flight, just 50 gallons in a tank that could hold thousands. During the long delay at the gate, the air conditioning units located underneath this tank had been running continuously, heating the fuel tank to abnormally high temperatures. The idea that a low-energy electrical short could cause such devastation was shocking, but wiring in the aircraft, particularly near the center wing tank, showed signs of degradation. Some of it dated back to the aircraft's original assembly in the early 1970s. Over time, insulation can crack or wear down, especially in high vibration areas. Additionally, wires carrying higher than expected voltages were routed near the fuel quantity system, violating best safety practices. The NTSB concluded the explosion was triggered by this short circuit, which passed energy into the fuel tank wiring, igniting the flammable vapor. Although a missile or bomb could not be definitively ruled out in the earliest days, the evidence overwhelmingly supported an internal fuel tank explosion. Despite the technical clarity of the findings, conspiracy theories persisted. Hundreds of eyewitnesses described seeing something streaking toward the aircraft. Some believed it was a missile, others suspected a cover-up. To address these concerns, the CIA even created a reconstruction animation showing how the breakup of the aircraft may have appeared from a distance, potentially matching witness descriptions. In the years that followed, the tragedy of TWA Flight 800 brought sweeping changes to aviation safety. The FAA mandated improvements in aircraft wiring standards, requiring better insulation and more thorough inspections. Electrical components near fuel tanks were redesigned or replaced. Perhaps the most significant change was the development and installation of fuel tank inerting systems, designed to pump inert nitrogen gas into fuel tanks to prevent flammable vapor buildup. Newer aircraft, like the Boeing 787, were built with these systems from the start. Older jets, including thousands of 747s and 737s, were retrofitted over time. These changes, while costly, were credited with significantly reducing the risk of future fuel tank explosions. In the wake of the tragedy, questions were raised, not just about maintenance procedures and fuel systems, but about the aircraft itself. The Boeing 747 had long been a symbol of safety, power, and progress. It was the queen of the skies, trusted by airlines, admired by crews, and beloved by millions of passengers. But for the first time in its storied history, the 747's invulnerability was called into question. Could something as routine as a short circuit bring down one of the most iconic airliners ever built? Investigators made it clear the aircraft's design was not flawed in its concept, but it required better safeguards, especially in systems that had aged. The 747 itself wasn't to blame, but the way its components aged and interacted had to be re-examined. Far from diminishing its legacy, TWA Flight 800 became a turning point in how the aviation world approached aging aircraft. More rigorous inspections, fuel tank safety systems, wiring overhauls, and through it all, the 747 continued to fly across oceans, continents, and time zones. Not as a reminder of what was lost, but as a vessel improved by what was learned. The tragedy didn't end the 747's story. It helped make the skies safer for the aircraft that followed. The story of TWA Flight 800 is one of heartbreak, mystery, science, and reform. While its loss was devastating, the lessons learned have helped protect every airline passenger since. It is a haunting reminder of the smallest vulnerabilities in complex systems and the relentless work required to keep air travel as safe as it is today. TWA Flight 800 remains one of the most defining events in modern aviation history, not just because of how it ended, but because of what it taught us. Out of tragedy came progress, and out of heartbreak, hard-earned knowledge that continues to keep passengers safe today. Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, consider commenting, and subscribing for more aviation history. Until next time, fly safe.